defined. However, you have charas and ganja in it. So charas they are the fruiting tops of the cannabis plant, and ganja is basically the resin, and resin is what you call marijuana in the Western countries primarily. So this marijuana is responsible for getting you high. Like this is the psychoactive component in the entire cannabis plant, which makes it illegal for consumption. However, then you have the seeds, you also have the leaves, you have the stem of the cannabis plant that does not have THC in it, which means that it can be used for other purposes, such as like horticulture, agricultural, industrial, commercial purposes, right? And so now coming to the fact that what is the psychoactive substance in here, which is very crucial because a lot of state policies and even a lot of international policies, including the United Nations, they have this condition primarily over here. Now, this substance is called the THC. And there is actually a value in the THC, according to most of the international policies that are out there, including some of the state policies in India, THC should always be equal to or less than 0.3% in cannabis. So it is said that if it becomes above 0.3%, then it actually becomes a narcotic and it becomes illegal. However, in the NDPS, there is no mention of THC, or not a lot of acts, I would say, mention THC. Only state policies primarily mention THC over there, which creates certain loopholes for certain companies to exploit. And that is how some of the products that are out there in the market that also have THC, that have psychoactive inducing substances, are also there for use. Of course, it is under prescription because it becomes a drug, but I think it's important for me to put out there that is how people use it, and it's important for me to even put out why it is called a narcotic in the first place. So yet again, to reiterate, it's the resin inside the cannabis plant which has the THC and which makes it psychoactive. If the resin and the fruiting tops are separated from the entire cannabis plant, you're left with the leaves of the cannabis plant, you're left with the seeds. These are not likely to have any THC, So that is that on just what cannabis is in general. I think I just needed to clarify that before I stepped into the laws.
Thank you so much, Arminder. I will never see the cannabis the same way it is. The pop culture, especially, I think, is responsible for this whole stir up. That I think you and I were just discussing how the cocoa plant, it is in the form of a cashew. It is so huge, and we don't think of the chocolate bars when we see it. But
Correct.
we don't forget that there is so much process involved in making that cocoa into a small bar that is sitting in a fridge, right?
Absolutely. And even that being said, cultivation is also a very intricate, tricky process here altogether. You have different ways of extractions that are also involved. And look, although cannabis is known to be extremely environmentally sustainable, that's one of the best parts about cannabis, is that it requires probably 1/3 of the water that you would for cotton.
Wow.
Organic cotton, that too.
Yeah.
And even the time duration to grow cannabis is really less. But the problem here is that it must be grown in extremely controlled situations, for instance, mainly people who have licenses to grow these plants grow it in environments where the soil is suitable, the climatic conditions are also suitable, because if that does not happen, the cannabis plant actually grows up to having high THC levels, which makes it a drug, and of course, when this gets to the state or the excise commission, because they are the ones who are regulating all of this
Yeah.
on ground level. They will come and they will burn your cannabis plants. Like they
Wow.
burn the entire field down if they have to. But you're not allowed to have plants that are high in THC. So like every once in a while, they will come in and they will take a sample from your plant to
Yes.
see if like the THC is regulated enough or not. And even in that sense, like although there's a state policy that clearly states that it should be 0.3% and less, sometimes cannabis plants also have like 1% THC, 5% THC, and it also depends on the variety of the seed and the plant that is being used. So like Indian hemp or like Indian cannabis is generally slightly higher in THC. So what people do is, now this is the costly process. This is why cannabis based products are expensive, not just because of the existing impediments that the laws of the land impose, but also because of the fact that they have to mainly import these seeds. And here's the irony that China is one of the greatest exporters of cannabis seeds. And so the thing is, when these controlled, genetically manufactured research seeds come into India, you grow them. That is also you still have to look into the climatic conditions or the environment in which this particular plant is being grown. So this is also, putting a lot of livelihoods of local farmers in stake and local cultivators in stake, because they don't have the money to contact importers. Importers and get imported seeds and and then plant them in an extremely controlled researched environment. So they often just like end up collaborating with initiatives and companies such as Himalayan Hemp itself is one of such initiatives that does that. So that is just like a little brief about cannabis and THC and even like the conditions where it needs to be cultivated. And I also think we have some questions, if I'm not wrong.
We'll take them at the end so that because I feel during the course of this webinar, they will be answered. Let's say they are not, we'll take them at the end.
All right, perfect. Yeah.
Okay. So my second question is, thank you for clearing out what is THC. I didn't know. And to be honest, I didn't even prepare, because I know when I spoke to you first on call, you enlightened me so much about the fact that it is used, like Himalayan hemp uses cannabis in making biodegradable sanitary napkins. And that will come to later. But tell us about the existing laws that are governing this and that are preventing cannabis to grow by the locals or not by the industrialists. What are the impositions? What are the loopholes that exist right now in the system?
So first things first, whenever you speak of cannabis, like I said, it's a narcotic drug. So you take in the Ndps into consideration. So Ndps was primarily one of the reasons why the cultivation of cannabis or hemp was restricted to a great extent in the first place, right? And then we are looking at certain provisions, however, that are specifically meant for cannabis. First things first, you have to look into Section 8 and Section 10 of the NDPS Act. When these two are read together, it creates a certain exception for cannabis, where it states that it can be used for medicinal and scientific purposes. Again, I would like to state before I get into these sections, what is the underlying objective of the NDPS Act? And the thing is that, way before the NDPS Act in the year 1961, you had the Convention for Narcotics, which was, India was also a party to that. And thereafter, they had one, I suppose, in 1971 as well. So India got into these treaties for preventing drug trafficking and imposing drug control. And as a result, there was a lot of pressure from the Western countries coming into India that you have to comply to the treaties, you have to adhere, and you have to pass a piece of central legislation which is stopping people from cultivating and growing unlicensed cannabis. Even during the colonization era, like the British colonial era, cannabis was also like this drug along with other such narcotics, even opium. It was regulated. I mean, the way they wanted to regulate is impose taxes, and they wanted to put excise on it. And that is how they were making an income out of it initially. So like this was under the Dangerous Drugs Act of 1930. And then that was subsequently like, replaced by the NDPS that came later on.
Yeah.
So NDPS was also a result of actually pressure coming in from the United Nations and all the Western countries. And here's the irony that those Western countries have now legalized cannabis.
Yeah.
For like in the US itself, if you
Amsterdam.
Amsterdam.
Yeah.
So like many of these Western countries, that had really, really stringent laws back in the day. And Western tourists used to come to India to consume cannabis for recreational purposes. We used to consume cannabis for recreational purposes because of its spiritual values, right? And then that is when it turned out to be a problem for many, because people are like, okay, you're propagating an entire drug problem here altogether.
Sorry to interrupt. I'll just add some context to the celebrity part that you are saying. Bob Marley, the Beatles. It makes much more sense now. Why did they come to India? Like, of course, it was for the culture. But yeah, quote unquote culture. But it was.
I mean, it could be, but also like they used to engage into cannabis for a lot of recreational use, and that was not regulated in India back in the day. And that is what changed after the NDPS. So the NDPS had an underlying motive that we need to curb drug trafficking. And that is what we have seen now when we compare the paper governance, which is the NDPS, and we compare it to the real life situations of so many people. Drug trafficking is still a persistent problem.
It is, yeah.
And the NDPS is not able to regulate it. And I will also maybe point out a few judgments over here later on during the conversation, why I personally believe, and a lot of people also believe, that NDPS is slightly flawed in certain areas. It's very rigid and technical. And also another thing is that it perceives that drug trafficking can be controlled by imposing stringent punishments on people. You can also be subjected to life imprisonment or even death penalty in certain cases. That is obviously for hardened criminals with commercial quantities.
Wow.
But like I said, even people that are caught with small quantities, they sometimes happen to be victims of drug trafficking. And they are also put into jail for that. Like they have to go through an entire trial. In fact, during my course of practice, I have come across people that have just been victims of drugs, and they've just, they ended up spending years in jail. And they spent like around 5 years in jail or something. And there was absolutely no course for rehabilitation. Although there is a section in the NDPS, in the miscellaneous chapter, it says that you can avoid this criminal liability or a criminal trial if you just surrender yourself to the court and say, look, I need treatment, I need rehabilitation, hence I should not be subjected to a criminal liability. But the ground reality is that how many rehabilitation centers do we really have for drug consumption in India, particularly? I don't think I've heard of the ones that are extremely popular, like, people go here for rehabilitation. I know according to the act itself, they are required to have these centers in the first place. And there's a fund also, like
the states or is it district wise or is it state wise?
It's normally, I think, state wise. And the thing is, it is funded through the government and the public. And the way the public funds is that, when they seize narcotics, they seize any contraband, the money they sort of like retrieve from the particular accused in that case, that is then contributed to these funds. That is where exactly like the money is going. I mean, in reality, when you are looking at
Hmm.
rehabilitation centers,
Hmm.
there's a lot of privatization here as well, and there are a lot of private rehabilitation centers, which I am not questioning their credibility in any way, of course, but
Hmm.
they appear to be spas. They appear to be like 5-star restaurants that you go to, because they're
Yeah.
charging you anywhere between 1 lakh to 5 lakhs a month
Wow.
for for rehabilitation.
Wow.
And you know for a fact that it is not affordable by most of the people that have been
Yeah.
victims.
Arminder, I would like to point out the irony here. So let's say the peddler who is from the streets, who is not from a educational background, he doesn't know the NDPS Act. Let's say the participants here, how many of us do we know the NDPS Act as much as you do, right? We don't know, even though we are from educated part of the society. How do we expect a peddler to know the laws? And also his customer is from a very well researched background. Like they are, so-called good middle class people or so-called upper class people. Now let's say they are both are caught, even the peddler and the upper class person. Who has the immunity, who has the privilege of having a lawyer? The upper class person. So
Yeah,
the
that's true.
part two of the problem, the consumption, that the consumer is left and he will find another peddler, but this peddler who was maybe using the money to run his house, pay his bills, doesn't have any option except giving up or for fighting away or finding a loophole in the system.
Correct. But
Yeah.
it's also, obviously, with that being said, we are not encouraging people
We are
that
not. We are not.
people are peddlers and that's a way of running their livelihood. This is
Yeah.
not a way of running your livelihood. You can do
Yeah.
anything else but this, honestly. And again, with that being said, I would like to point out another, I would say, a loophole. Yeah, we are not actually
We are just
sympathizing with drug
pointing out
dealers
the
over here.
loophole that,
The loophole here is that it does not demarcate between a
yeah.
victim, a
Yeah.
drug peddler, and a drug
Yeah.
trafficker. There is
Yeah.
a huge demarcation between all these people,
Yeah.
and the thing is that, of course, whatever penalties the NDPS is imposing towards hardened criminals that are just
Yeah.
taking like drugs, and they are propelling them, like the idea of taking drugs,
Yeah.
trafficking them. Obviously, they need stringent punishments. But here again, like I said, there is no way of ascertaining whether the person is actually a drug trafficker or not. That is one of the things. And also, I agree with the fact that you need stringent punishments in the NDPS for those people, for those hardened criminals. But also, there must be some side of it that uh, provides reformation.
Yeah.
Right now,
Yeah.
NDPS is inclined towards the punitive side and not the reformative side.
Yeah.
There is no balance between the two. It's mainly on the punitive side when you
Yeah.
actually take it into practice. Now, with everything like being said on the social aspect, coming to the more
Yeah.
legal aspect of cannabis in the NDPS. So, like I was saying, cannabis itself is defined under the NDPS, and then you have definitions for charas and ganja. And just to reiterate for our audience that has just joined, charas, fruiting tops; ganja, the resin having THC. THC is the psychoactive substance in the cannabis. And now, what it says is that for medicinal and scientific purposes, you can use cannabis.
Cannabis. Yes.
Yeah, you can use cannabis. And also, one of the primary factors of the NDPS, like objectives, I would say, of the NDPS, whatever you do, right? Even if you are making products that are not they are not psychoactive, they are not narcotics, you're only using maybe the seeds of cannabis or whatever, they do not have THC, highly processed, but you still need to obtain mandatory licenses. When you
Yes.
read the NDPS Act, you will see that it primarily focuses on the fact that any unlicensed activity, an activity can be anything from cultivation, possession, use, consumption, manufacture, sale, distribution, import, export, transport, all if all of these activities are unlicensed, you're likely to face criminal liability for the same. And not just under the NDPS, but also under the Drugs and Cosmetics Act of 1940 that we will come into. So again, these two sections, section 8 and section 10, and then you go on to section 14. Now, this section 14 is actually really, really crucial because most of the state policies are availing this particular section for legalizing cultivation primarily. Right? This section is for cannabis under the NDPS Act. And what it states is that it can be used for obtaining seed and fiber. Okay, so seed and fiber, it excludes everything else. And it allows it for horticultural and industrial purposes only. So now what is happening here is, like, when states are taking this policy, for instance, there are 2 states currently that have policies for cannabis. For the first state ever in India to legalize cannabis was Uttarakhand. And then you have Uttar Pradesh also. They both have policies. But the thing here is that there's a entire shield of vagueness surrounding it. Now, the Uttarakhand policy, for instance, it's only taking in section 14 into consideration. And it is saying that, you can use the cannabis plant, as in the seeds of the cannabis plants, the leaves of the cannabis plants, to obtain fiber, which is fine. The fiber does not have to do anything with the resin or the fruiting tops to begin with. So that is fine. Like, fiber comes under the industrial purpose of it. If you're making, if you're getting into the textile sector, and if you're getting into the infrastructure sector, then it is an industrial use. So that gets covered in it. Then you have it for horticultural purposes. But this is where it includes medicinal purposes. So when pharmaceuticals need to use cannabis, they get into a dilemma that if we are growing cannabis that is meant for medicine, is it legal or not? Because the state policy here is telling me that it's not telling me that I cannot use it for medicinal purposes, but it is definitely telling me that I only need to use it for industrial and horticultural purposes. The second dilemma that comes in is that, when you're comparing 2 pieces of, like, you're comparing 2 laws together, right? The central law will always supersede the state laws. So where the NDPS is not telling you that this is illegal, you can still use it for medicinal purposes. The state, however, is not expressly including it in their policies. This is where the problem is arising. The second thing that the state is doing, this is only in Uttarakhand. Uttar Pradesh does not have this. So Uttarakhand is stating that you grow cannabis, but you have to make sure the THC value, again, like I said, is less than 0.3%.
0.3 or 0.5?
0.3.
0.3. Okay.
Yeah. So if it is less than 0.3%, it's okay. If it is not, then we'll have to go ahead and burn your plants. Like, that's what we have to do here altogether. And the thing is, like I said, the conditions. Now, this 0.3% is actually coming from foreign countries. And they are usually, like, their climate is relatively more on the colder end. On the colder
By there,
side.
do you mean which countries? Do you mean European, United, like?
Yeah, European and like places like Canada, let's just say, or even
the colder
some
nations.
states. Yeah, Canada is definitely, like, it's a colder nation in comparison.
Yeah.
So the variety of the cannabis plant is also differs from country to country. There are different varieties. They actually happen to grow in conditions where the THC is automatically low. And while you compare this to Indian hemp, which is, Indian hemp, basically, the THC is generally a little high.
Yeah.
And that is when 0.3% poses a grave issue,
Yeah.
because they're like, okay, well, if we need such, if you have a policy, it should come with some level of regulation, and it also needs to come with certain bodies that need to like supervise it and make sure that these cultivators and these farmers are given those kind of conditions, like controlled
Resources. Yeah.
greenhouses and stuff, where you can grow the cannabis plant, which is actually lower in THC.
Hmm.
Also, they need to put in a lot of money into research and development to
Hmm.
then prepare seeds,
Hmm.
that are likely to produce plants that have low THC.
Hmm.
And like I said, that is one of the reasons why some of the companies that today have cannabis-based products that are meant for consumption, they usually import seeds. Okay. So that was that on like the NDPS part of it. And also, it's also important for people to understand what are the quantities here. Like there's small quantity, which is defined, and commercial quantity, but you also have something in the middle here. So you have small, intermediate, and commercial quantity. Commercial quantity obviously being the highest. And there's a lot of penalty that is involved in this. For the commercial quantity of cannabis, you can be in jail for up to 20 years. You can get imprisoned, and you can also be imposed a fine of up to rupees 2 lakhs. So that is one of the punishments that you get for possessing a commercial quantity of ganja. And let me tell you, the commercial quantity has to be a lot here in this case. So that is definitely one aspect of the law, and this is more on the criminal side of it. Now coming into medicinal use. Now, the thing that we get asked the most, like this is for people that want to venture into the cannabis industry. They usually come in with the idea of preparing CBD oil. And CBD oil is something I don't know if our users have, like, sorry, our audience has heard of it, but it also gained a lot of traction during the Sushant Singh Rajput case as well. So people started questioning the legality of CBD oil. And CBD is basically a component that is present in cannabis. You don't and there are three types of CBD in that case. Like there is full spectrum CBD oil, there is broad spectrum CBD oil, and then there is CBD isolate. So the full spectrum oil is basically a mixture of all the components of the CBD plant, the cannabis plant itself, right? So you even have resin and the fruiting tops present in it. So it might have a bit of THC in it, you know. But again, like it's said, when it's processed and manufactured into quite an extent, or if they are making sure that the plants that they are using are not high in THC, they are only using the leaves. They are excluding the resin and the fruiting tops out. The leaves also have certain THC because it rubs against the resin, right? So, well, in that case, this is full spectrum CBD oil that they you know tend to manufacture from the extraction process. There are different types of extraction processes as well. Then like I said, you have the broad spectrum oil, and broad spectrum oil is not likely to have THC at all in it. Like it is taken from components that normally do not contain THC at all. So this is broad spectrum, and broad spectrum in that case is extremely legal. And then you have CBD isolate, and isolate has no THC at all. Like the difference between broad spectrum and CBD isolate is that broad spectrum might have some level of THC, but it's not likely to exceed like 0.3% or anything. Isolate is the purest form of CBD. Actually, it has absolutely no psychoactive substance in it. It will only extract the CBD component from the cannabis plant. So these are three things, and these three things are also being sold in the market here. And now the question arises, how? Now, we have to mainly look into the first fact that allopathy, as a field of medicine, is not using cannabis anywhere. The only way that cannabis can be used is under ASU, which is Ayurvedic, Unani, and Siddha system. Ayurvedic, Siddha, and Unani, ASU. So ASU is the only way one can enter in the market to produce medicinal cannabis. And now ASU comes under the Ayush Ministry. And again, Ayush is regulated. Ayush does not have a central legislation of its own. It does not have a law of its own. You don't have something named Ayush laws. These are Ayush laws. You have the Drugs and Cosmetics Act, and the regulatory body that is issuing licenses and everything under Ayush Ministry. It is the Ayush Ministry, yes, but there's also CDSCO, which is the body for the regulatory body for under the Drugs and Cosmetics Act and rules. Drugs and Cosmetics Act of 1940 and rules of 1945. So when you look into the rules, you will actually find all the forms. If I am not wrong, you can, if people want to research, and you can find these forms for applying for licenses. That is, even under the Ayush, you can apply for licenses. You will have to start from section 150 to, I guess it goes to 168. Sorry, not section, rule. So you have forms that are already allotted. You have to fill these forms and you have to give it to the state government, and the state government will thereafter issue you the licenses. Of course, it's a more intricate process than it is being stated. But once you see the form, there are some basic details in there, like what do you want to get a license for? First of all, I mean, are you a manufacturing unit, or are you a third party, which is basically taking third party licenses, and you're only operating an e-commerce site, and you're having these people sell their products on your sites? Which guidelines? It's actually Drugs and Cosmetic Rules of 1945. That is where you will find these rules. Like, these are the guidelines that are mainly meant for Ayush. They also include homeopathy. Again, homeopathy does not include cannabis. It's only and strictly ASU. Now, why does that happen? Like, how can you say that it's only exclusive to ASU? That's because when you look into the Drugs and Cosmetics Act of 1940, you have a schedule E1, and you have the substances listed. Now, the irony here is that these are listed as poisonous substances. And these are like these drugs. Cannabis is known to be, cannabis sativa over there precisely, is known to be a vegetable derived drug or a plant derived drug. Right. So you can find cannabis sativa listed as a poisonous substance in within a list of other substances as well under the ASU. So again, that is Schedule E1. Now, Schedule E1, even if it is listed as a poisonous substance, it doesn't entail that you cannot use this in medicines at all. Then what it does is that there is the first schedule of the Drugs and Cosmetics Act. It has a list of books, and I'm telling you, around 100 books. And these are all ASU books, all like the old Ayurvedic texts and everything. Like, there are books available for you. These are used for formulations and preparations of Ayurvedic medicines. And if one of those books is stating that cannabis is a substance that is permitted, it does not normally require clinical trials for you then, because oils or whatever you put out in the market that is a cannabis-based medicine, these are generally drugs because they're consumed. Some of them are even applied externally on the body. Then it becomes a cosmetic under the definition here altogether. So that's a little brief on the two central pieces of legislation, that is the NDPS and the Drugs and Cosmetics Act. There's also another rule that people refer to, but this is after you have obtained licenses from the CDSCO or the manufacturing licenses under Ayush. The certificate is the Medicinal and Toilet Preparations Act. And this is actually an excise act of 1955. This is also where you have provisions for cannabis and even alcohol, for that matter, that is used in medicines. They need to store these particular components. And so you need to obtain licenses from the state, from the Excise Commission for those things. So that's on that.
Wow, I mean, that was phenomenal. I mean, the knowledge you have, it doesn't even cross our minds. I mean, this is all available on Google, right? It is all out there in the internet. But of course, with the practice, of course, but none of us take the initiative to find out why is it the way it is right now.
Correct.
I'm very happy that we are doing this conversation and it is going out on the internet. So everybody who has any questions about why is it the way it is, why are the laws the way they are, and the biggest myth that you broke for me was the allopathy part. I wasn't aware of it.
Okay.
I completely second you, Pratima. I mean, the way she has explained, I never expected her to, go get. She was in a flow of explaining things. I'm so happy that
Thank you so much.
you have so in-depth knowledge of what you are saying. And thank you so much for educating all of us here and the hundreds of people who will watch this later. Thank you so much for bringing this to the light that, okay, there is this aspect of it. You need to see it in the always, like the CBD oil or the medical use, the horticulture use. Talking about the horticulture use, I know Himalayan Hemp, because you told me, uses cannabis to make the most beautiful products out of it and the most biodegradable way. Please tell us about that.
So firstly, Himalayan Hemp is a company that I work with. And what it is doing is it started with the motive to save the indigenous committees, the community out there in Himachal Pradesh. It is actually based in Himachal Pradesh.
Yeah.
So the farmers in Himachal Pradesh, obviously, they used to like cultivate hemp for a living, practically. And, like I said, these people do not have the knowledge or the resources or the access to go to authorities, apply for licenses, pay their fees, and hire lawyers and navigate around this entire fiasco altogether. The system. Then what we did was we bridged the gap. Firstly, we try to then coming to the products. In that case, Himalayan Hemp has a product called the Canspirator, which is actually an N95 mask, which is authorized by the Ministry of Textiles India. So it approves and it lives up to the N95 status. Again, this mask is unique because it's made of hemp. And the thing is that it is sourcing the raw materials from these farmers, these local cultivators, artisans, and everything. It is environmentally sustainable because hemp as a fabric is completely biodegradable. It is not going to produce any waste whatsoever. Then they also had menstrual pads. Now these are at the moment only catered to people in the rural areas, the women over there particularly, because they do not have the access or the resources or the privilege to take sanitary napkins, or and that's when these guys come into play, because firstly they are reusable. You can always wash them and you can reuse them. So that is where they are primarily focused on at the moment. And with that being said, like even when I joined Himalayan Hemp, which is honestly speaking, not too long ago, I was very surprised to see that cannabis as a plant is, why do we, when we read the NDPS, often people are questioning, okay, why does it even say industrial, commercial, medicinal purposes, research and scientific purposes? All you do is like you smoke marijuana out of it, and that is why it is a narcotic, it is punishable. And that is not the case, because you can practically create fabric out of hemp, and hemp fabric is actually a very, very, very sustainable fabric, even in comparison to organic cotton. Like I said, you can also use it in infrastructure, because hemp is used to make cement as well. There are a lot of people don't know about. I did not know about this honestly till I started working. It's used in medicinal purposes. Of course, there are a lot of researchers out there, but still, in the medicine industry, in the pharmaceutical industry, cannabis has a long way to go, because you need to, there are many studies, there are researches, there are clinical trials that are being conducted that say that these CBD oils are used, or they can be, these cannabis based medicines can be used to treat disorders, and even epilepsies and stuff, arthritis. But yet again, it needs some sort of contribution in terms of research and development, even from the uh, the medicinal community, the medicine community here altogether. So yeah, I would say there is a long way to go, and there are theories proving otherwise as well. Some people are claiming that, look, we did our clinical trials, there were no benefits of it, right? So there's no definitive answer whether it will work. It's like a magic product. I'm not here endorsing products for people, but I'm saying that uh, it is a multi-purpose plant or a crop. It's just not a narcotic itself. So that is one of the things. And I, like, when it comes to reforms, I think there is reform that is needed on the central level as well as the state level, is because when you look at, companies can also always create products. Companies are creating products. But the thing is that they are not primarily sourcing their raw materials from the local farmers, just because they don't have any means for cultivation. And even if they do, it's only in the state of Uttarakhand and Himachal Pradesh and Uttar Pradesh, right? Mainly those northern regions are more inclined towards hemp cultivation and everything. But when you just take in the central India or the southern India, you don't have any policies which are obviously regulating those things. So first of all, that reform is certainly needed here. And even in those policies, when they are only availing Section 14, it is limiting cultivation for medicinal purposes. Although industrial and commercial purposes become a lot easier, like for people to venture now into textiles has become a lot more favorable than actually going into the medicinal pharmaceutical route of it. But still, again, you need a more well structured policy when it comes to it. And when you talk about governing laws, even like the Drugs and Cosmetics Act, like I said, it only mentions cannabis sativa once in the entire act, and that is as a poisonous substance under AST. That is about it. It will not tell you that this is the only amount you can use, this is where you can source it from, these are places you can get all the licenses for cannabis based products. And again, I also want to put something out there, where while we are talking about like reforms and laws, FSSAI, which is the Food Safety and Standards Advisory Board, that they also released a notification, I believe, that is dated 26th October of 2020, which is very recent. It's just a draft notification. It is for our viewers to go and research. But if that gets passed, that will make an amendment under the FSSAI Food and Additives Act of 2011. Regulation. It'll create an amendment under this, right? And that would then mean that this could be the first ever law that gives you perfect directions for use of hemp and CBD in beverages and food products. That yet needs to be passed. In fact, according to the notification itself, it said that it might be passed on the 1st of July. So now I have to look into the notifications or the Gazette after I am done with this session. So again, it is prescribing the limit. It's describing the THC, prescribing the THC limit. Although it's only restricted to seed, and I'm not sure if leaves are also present there, but probably only leaves and seed. So it's including charas, it's excluding charas and ganja out for obvious reasons, because that's the narcotic part of it. But I mean, in that case, it will give companies the liberty to put out products that can be consumed on a day-to-day basis, like caffeine is normally. Your Red Bull and all your energy drinks are out there on the counter for you to take up. Maybe someday, because of this notification, you might also have hemp seed products out there sitting on the shelves for you to directly consume without any warning whatsoever. But again, that does not get resolved only by the way of a notification. It needs other more corresponding regulations and laws in order to create an entire product and put it out in the market. The same thing currently goes in for ASU as well. The FSI notification, honestly, I think I have the notification number with me. So I don't have the number, but I have the date. Somebody has asked. So the date is 26th October of 2020. You can find this notification on the FSSAI site as well if you want. Again, it's under the additives, regulation for additives in the year 2011.
From your insights, what I understand is like companies need a breather and a liberty that we can be responsible enough if we just make things a bit flexible. And I guess when we talk about responsibilities, it is not only companies, it is not only states, but people who are going to watch this and people who are watching this right now, and you and me as well. We have attached so much social stigma to cannabis. That is, when we were discussing this session, we were like, okay, we have to put even a disclaimer that this is not for fun. We are really talking about something very serious here.
Correct.
And the Sushant case happened, whatever the fact of the case are, we don't know about it, but the amount that it was blown up to, my God, the youth is completely in trash. We are spoiling our generation. I mean, nobody even took time out to understand a part of the whole process, like what is it, why is it a narcotic, why things are the way they are.
Correct. Again, it's difficult. Like it's important for people to understand what part of the cannabis is a narcotic and what is actually considered as a crop and a plant as well. So yes. I hope I made that clear, although I had the plan to actually put out judgments from the Ndps, which are a little flawed in a way. And in fact, if people wanted, I would say you can also look up to the judgment of Bhuta Singh and another versus Union of India, I believe. This was recently passed in the year 2020 itself. You can, when you read these judgments, right, you understand the rigidities of and technicalities of the NDPS Act. Because what, when we speak of narcotics, what we are missing out on is the chapter which enumerates the process of arrest and seizure and everything. That is also extremely important to go through if you're somebody who's practicing in the NDPS. You need to understand that there is a certain procedure that you need to go about. And, there are cases over here. There was a case of Hira Singh. And in that judgment, these are Supreme Court judgments. So in that judgment, basically what had happened is that there was secret information about somebody selling poppy straw. And they found poppy straw. They found 2 bags of poppy straw, 36 kgs and 39 kgs respectively. But the thing here is that even though they had seized the contraband, the Supreme Court had opinion that well, it is not done according to the procedure of arrest that is laid down in the NDPS. And an acquittal was given on those technicalities. On those technical loopholes, there was an acquittal, despite the contraband being found in this particular case. So there are many such judgments. Some of the judgments are wonderful. They give a huge insight on like what the NDPS is, and judgments again are very important because it creates precedents. It means that it affects people in the pre-trial stages, the trial, and even while granting bail, among other things, right? So that is what people can look into when they read the judgments of the NDPS. There are some judgments that say that NDPS can be read together, like the provisions can be read together with the Drugs and Cosmetics Act. Again, that is when you will understand how important the Drugs and Cosmetics Act of 1930 is, because this is the act which is giving you licenses here in the first place.
Yeah. So there are a couple of people asking the dates and judgments, everything. This session is being recorded. It will be live on YouTube and you can revisit it, because Arminder has mentioned a couple of times that, the dates and everything. You can revisit the session and look it for yourself. And if you find anything that you find interesting, you can always tag her on LinkedIn, talk to her about it. She's very approachable. So you can do that.
Definitely. I'll be happy to answer some questions as much as I can. I'm sorry, like I usually look at my messages like really late. So don't get mad at me. But I think like there's this is the kind of topic that you have endless discussions from. Even when you get into the licensing procedures, there's a whole lot of things that come into play, right? So I think what I was able to do here is maybe just give a general idea about what it is like to work in the cannabis industry. And even for lawyers, this is like a niche, place of practice. Lawyers can come in because this is not just catering to one particular act. This is involving several other acts that you can specialize in: the food industry, the pharmaceutical industry, the textile industry. Everything is involved when it comes to the state policies are involved here. So policy making is also involved here altogether. So I mean, are there any questions we can take up, because we are actually short on time?
It's fine. We can take it up 10-15 minutes more. I mean, the way the session is. Yeah, definitely. We can take this up. Yeah, no issues. So the two questions that Nikita had, I think we have answered it. We don't want to discuss about how legally we can grow this. It is not. We don't want to put this out on YouTube. Like this is going to be on YouTube, and we don't want this to be in wrong hands. If we're going to give this information, once it is accessible by the world, we can't control who watches this. We can't control how people put it into use. So if you want to find that out, maybe you can get in touch with Arminder personally, or you can just Google it,
Okay. Yeah. There are just some, actually, I'm unable to like view the chats. I'm sorry. Some of them just pop up. So I see what I see by that time, but I'm actually on my phone. So I can't sometimes look at the chats altogether. Otherwise.
So we have a question, and it says that I think in US now it is legal, as you had rightly mentioned.
Only in some states, yes.
Yes, only in some states. And now India is now stuck with these regressive laws. What can we do to legislative reforms to make these things right? I think we discussed that, and how as just eventually, like Rome wasn't built in a day. Talk about it, discuss, make it a discussion where you don't stigmatize it, gain the trust from the government that if it is legalized, we will not misuse our rights, because that is what is happening right now. Even if it is banned, it is not banned to make it undemocratic. It is just banned because there are harmful consequences if it is in the wrong hand.
That's correct. And there's another thing that I told Priyanka, because a lot of people have this argument in terms of recreational use as well, that first of all, it is not fatal, which is right. Cannabis is not fatal. You cannot overdose on cannabis. That's correct. But to say that it does not have any withdrawal would be wrong. cannabis does have psychological dependence on the body, and it is not good to be uh, uh, using it for recreational purposes, because you will create dependency. You will have to check into a rehabilitation center probably. It's not going to give you physical withdrawal symptoms like cocaine and heroin does and all those other drugs do, but it doesn't make it any better either, because you're technically dependent for your day-to-day activities on cannabis and consuming cannabis. So that kind of consumption that is high in THC and it has a psychoactive effect is not right. It is not good, and that is why I told you, even during this session, and even several times during the content we put out for Himalayan Hemp, we often have to like tell people that, look, this is only for educational purposes. We are not telling people to go and consume it and possess it for recreational purposes. Even possession that is unlicensed will get you in jail. So there are ramifications to your actions in terms of this. There are also petitions before the Delhi High Court and even the Supreme Court. I don't know if people might have heard about the great legalization movement, but in the social media aspect of things, people have misconstrued great legalization. They've like, oh yeah, now we will be able to like roam around freely like some people do in the US. Even Amsterdam has cafes out there that are just meant for recreational use. India is not going to have that, at least not in the coming future as I see it. And obviously, great legalization movement is far from that. It is focusing on the current state policies. It's not about people consuming it. It's about the farmers that are cultivating it. Their livelihood is dependent on this. So it is for them as well. It's for the betterment of the law and the policies that regulate this entire all the activities that are connected with drugs and narcotics altogether, right?
Yeah.
So
I mean, a lot of people in the audience think that the laws are made by orthodox philosophy of school, but I feel even Arminder and me right now, we are the upcoming generation, and we don't agree that it should be legalized for recreational purposes, because it won't be regularized like smoking and
it is very
drinking.
difficult.
It
It
is
is very
very
difficult
difficult.
to
Yeah.
regularize it and supervise it on a ground level, because when you
Yeah.
see things on the ground level, even right now the cannabis that is being grown for like these industrial purposes is also being misused in some way, shape or form. And getting licenses, procuring licenses itself is a huge task altogether. So it means that most of the people are out there doing it illegally. Cannabis is something that does not need a lot of effort. It will also grow in the wild if you go to see, and people are misusing that for sure. And there are you know like dangerous effects of consuming cannabis that is unregulated and it is grown in the wild. It will have physical side effects to your body and mind at the same time. So it's just like a disclaimer to all the people. We are not endorsing this in any way or shape or form, and even the companies and the uh, hemp sector and the cannabis industry is not doing that actually in any way, shape or form. Although I don't know, there might be some Robin Hoods here in this industry as well. But if you look at licensed, registered companies and industries, sorry, not industries, factories, pharmaceutical units, they are not doing this. It's a very licensed, it's a very regulated process.
Yeah.
So are there any other questions on this?
Okay. So Akhil has, so there are two questions. Himachal recently floated legislation to legalize cultivation of cannabis. Gujarat in 2017 decriminalized hemp from a state legislation that previously classified it as intoxicating substance. Okay, I lost the question, sorry. It now exists in the gray area for any business to enter into. What would it take apart from the government policies to become more black and white?
Yeah, like I said, that's actually a good question, because even at the beginning of the session, I mentioned that there is a huge layer of vagueness that are surrounding these policies. And the thing is, like, when you look into these policies, you will see that they are not particularly, even when you Google such things, right? Even if you sit and do your research, they are not really out there for people to sit and view like you do for Bear Acts. The Bear Act is available. There is a separate portal, so there is an official gazette where you can access notifications. For state policies, this sometimes does not happen to be the case. There is so much of vagueness surrounding it. Even like I said, when it comes to Uttarakhand and even Himachal Pradesh, since Himalayan hemp is actually based in Himachal Pradesh, there they are planning to get cannabis legalized for cultivation for medicinal purposes. This is proposed at the moment. It is not finalized out there. We are cultivating cannabis currently for industrial purposes, which is for textiles. It is permissible, but again, like I said, for its entry in the pharmaceutical industry, it has to be more regulated, because people are consuming these products. They are not indirectly affected by it. They are directly consuming these pharmaceutical products here altogether. So there's a lot of research, and there's a lot of work that needs to be done in the policy making basis as well. I can agree, like somebody who said that NDPS was made by a bunch of orthodox old dudes. Perhaps I'm not going to comment on it. But if you look into NDPS itself, because it was made under so much of pressure, lawmakers did not really have a chance to contemplate in the first place. They had received criticism for that matter after they enacted NDPS. They were like, well, why are certain drugs being categorized as hard drugs? Now, this is also a problem with the NDPS, that heroin, like I said, it's a very hardcore drug. It can kill you. It's lethal. And cannabis falls into the same category. Other such, plants that also have other purposes also fall into the same category. So again, it's not that well thought out as it was supposed to be. And the amendments that came into these acts, there was an amendment in 2001 which made the punishments more stringent. That is what it did. It included capital punishment as well. Like, you can be subjected to death penalty if you're a repeated offender. And that's a topic of human rights and violations altogether. That's a different thing. I'm not getting into it. But the major amendments that have been made were in the year 2001, even 2014. That is also that's something you can look into. And even otherwise, there are amendments coming into NDPS almost every other month or two, because they are adding in drugs. This drug is also illegal. This is illegal, because there's so many man-made, there are so many artificial drugs out there, that are using these components to create something synthetic, which is lethal, and it is not good. This is propagating to the drug problem.
There are so many permutation and combinations. Like, yes. It is basically being made in a lab, right?
Now, that is what they are availing. These are synthetic drugs, right? So these are this is one of the huge reasons why we need laws. We do need laws. We do need stringent punishments, but they need to be more thought out, even on state levels. When they are making these policies, when they're implementing it, they have to make sure to give very clear directions. I would also suggest somebody who made a point for the Gujarat and Himachal Pradesh policies. Take a look at the Uttarakhand policy also, because it was the first state to legalize the use of cannabis in India. You will see the policy is almost like maybe 4 or 5 pages here altogether. Somebody had also filed an RTI, and the Commissioner of Narcotics Bureau had answered, like, these are the sections in this particular policy. THC, the use, what parts of the cannabis plant, everything has been stated therein. So I think that would be my answer on that part.
So we have this. I guess this will be the last question, and this is something I really wanted to talk about. Why is alcohol legal and why not cannabis?
That's actually a very good argument that a lot of people use. And look, alcohol, even in pharmaceuticals, when you go into even in pharmaceuticals, alcohol is used. In allopathic medicines, alcohol is used. In fact, some of the medicines that you get Okay, RTI question also I'll answer, by the way.
Yeah.
So even when you prepare medicines, there are certain preparations that require alcohol. But when it comes to consumption, a lot of people do keep this argument that why isn't alcohol
Criminalized.
illegal? Yes, and criminalized, and even smoking for that matter. Because actually, when you look at it from a very objective point of view, alcohol is responsible for many crimes, domestic violence and whatnot. It also creates an exemption from criminal liabilities in many cases. When you're intoxicated uh, from alcohol, it makes an exemption for the criminal or the accused that has committed the crime, because they don't understand the nature of it. So why is the kind of question that even we ask, to be honest. But we do not say at the same time that instead of alcohol, you legalize cannabis. Because like I said, I'm just coming to the same point. I'm reiterating, it's creating psychological dependence, and that is scientifically proven, and that is something that people need to understand. These substances are not just creating physical withdrawals, they're also creating a huge level of psychological dependence. And of course, like, people tend to realize it at some point of their lives, and they have to then resort to rehabilitation, which is also not the best here in India at the moment. So I think that would be my answer on that part.
I have an answer, like, just from a logical point of view. What alcohol, the damage has already been done. And alcohol is grown from existing products like barley or, it is fertilized, it is fermented, sorry, not it is fermented over the period of time, right? Cannabis is grown. The growing part is voluntary. And do we want to go through that process? Like, haven't we learned the lessons from alcohol, that what damage intoxicating product can cause? And smoking, I don't think smoking is intoxicating. Smoking is more like an addiction, like a nicotine addiction, right?
Yes.
So I don't think they compare marijuana and tobacco smoking. I don't think they are the same, on the same page.
Yeah, but the thing is, like, with smoking and alcohol, you have proven damage to your body in short run or even in the long run, like the damage that is done to your liver and your kidneys, and even to your lungs in the long run.
Yeah, of course, the damage is there. Yeah, of course. But it doesn't mean that two wrongs make a right,
Yeah, that's exactly what I was saying, that it is causing, it is habit causing, and it is addictive. It is creating that psychological dependence.
And we can't let marijuana be the next alcohol or cigarette in this country.
Absolutely not. Like, it could also be a cause for many other accidents, even on road. Like, there have been cases also, for that matter, even under the Ndps. It's very important to read such judgments, even when you are proposing arguments for the legalization of cannabis for recreational use. You'll have to really study, like, what can be the ramifications when you legalize cannabis. You need to ask yourself on an individual level before you question the system. What do you think? Why it should and should not be out there for people to access? These are the questions you need to ask. You need to do your research. You need to read judgments on the same. And I think that is when you will find an answer which is satisfactory. Again, like I said, this is an argument that can go on for ages, to be honest. And there is still, like, you go to any social media platform, we have it on our platform as well. There are a bunch of, like, people coming in that use it for recreational purposes, and they're like, yes, this is what we want. We want legalization for recreation. And it becomes difficult to explain and even to regulate our content and settle it down so that people do not get the wrong idea. So even from this session, I don't want people to have the wrong idea. It's about understanding the industry a little better. Of course, there's a lot of depth to this, right? And we can have another session on that.
Definitely.
But yeah, I think are we done with the questions? Because
I think we are done.
Okay, all right.
Arminder, would you be the best person to answer this, or is this related to any medical expertise?
uh, Damages caused by cannabis, extortion, permanent or temporary damage to the body as well. Well, I cannot really answer on that part because, yeah, you do need somebody who has expertise in the medical field. And again, it depends. Like I said, there are a lot of varieties of
Factors,
cannabis out
yeah.
there. It depends on the THC level as well. It depends if it's being consumed in its raw form or if it is being consumed as a medication. Then the effects on the body and the mind will be ascertained. So I think on that part,
Yeah.
sorry, I
Also
mean,
the factors like
yeah, you can do
comorbidity,
your
if
research on that
somebody's,
part.
yeah. I
There's
think
a lot
that
of clinical trial and a lot of clinical data out there for people to actually go through and
yes.
research if they want to in depth. And that's, I mean, unfortunately, we don't have the time for that because we are not mainly here talking about its effects on the body. I would not be the best person to answer that
Yeah,
either.
definitely. Yeah, so I think we have exhausted the questions. We have exhausted the scope of discussion that we were here for. And I have nothing but like praises for you, Arminder. You have
So
blown
much.
us all away with your knowledge, with your calm, with the way it was. I wish we were taught this in school. And given that you are one of like your age is what, 23, 24, and
25.
25, yeah. But
Yeah.
being so young and having the depth of knowledge that you have, I mean, it's mind blowing, it's humbling, it is comforting to know that there is somebody I can ask this about without being judged or without being told that what are you asking, this is, are you using it as well. The purpose of this was, we all can sit together like civilized humans and talk about something that is a very gray area.
Correct. It is a very gray area, even
Yeah.
in terms of like legalities and stuff. The interpretation is very tricky. It is still to be, I mean, unless something is written very expressly, very clearly, you cannot know for sure. So I think I would conclude it on that part.
I think you have a compliment for you, Arvinder, in the chat box.
Okay, like I said, it's a little difficult for me to access the chat box in my phone.
I'll tell
But
you personally then.
okay, all right, cool. I
Yeah.
think we can wrap up here.
Aditya, it was noted. I'll definitely pass on the compliment to Arminder. Definitely.
Okay, Aditya, thank you. I mean, for whatever compliment that was. Sorry, I'm not able to access it, but thank you everybody who stuck around. I lasted a little longer than an hour. So I think we can just
wrap this up. Yeah.
Wrap this up totally.
And send this to your friends. It is on YouTube. You can, whenever they talk about cannabis, you can, I think the whole session can be used as, what I think I have a more sound argument than you. So you can use this as a party debates, but please be very mindful of whatever you consume, whether it is cannabis, whether it's alcohol, cigarettes. You have one life, you have one body. I read this quote by Warren Buffett. He said, if you had one car your whole life, how much would you take care of it? And that's the same with your body and mind. You have one of it. And please take care of yourselves. Do not fall into habits that you cannot get out of easily. Right?
Correct. Definitely. Okay,
Yeah.
Priyanka, thank you
so much.
For hosting this, for being an incredible host, and thank you to everybody who stuck around. And I know it's like the middle of the week and it's 12 p.m. Most of the people are at work, but really overwhelmed with the registration and like some people that showed up and put their burning questions out there. And we'll definitely continue the discussion on this part. And I know this needs attention at the moment. There aren't a lot of people, even in the legal industry, that speak about this or even hold knowledge about this for that matter. So yeah, definitely. Thank you, Priyanka.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm very happy that you are here. We'll get on a call after this. So yeah, thank you so much, everybody. We are very humbled to have you here. I mean, the webinars were such a thing in lockdown. All of us, there were like thousands of webinars that have happened by LawSikho, and every time the response is so great. We will do one of these again with Arminder, I'm very sure. And please stay safe, take care of yourself and your families. See you soon.